Hello and welcome again to Meet the Candidates 2020 here on WCMU TV. I'm David Nicholas, this year speaking with our guests remotely, and joined this time by Representative Graham Filler. He is a Republican incumbent for Michigan's House District number 93, seeking a second term to that office. Welcome to you, sir. Congratulations on the primary win in August. And in our first moment or two, a little bit about you, your background and experience you bring to the campaign.
Sure. So I'm the state representative from the 93rd district. That's Clinton County and half of Gratiot County. It's right in the middle of your hand. It's where I grew up. I am an attorney. I served at the Michigan Attorney General's office for 7 years and then decided I wanted to serve the public in the House. So I had a primary and won, and then I serve now as the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and I serve on the Health, Regulatory Reform, and Energy Committees in the House. And I guess the one thing I would add, people, especially in election year, get very fired up about politics, and maybe they think it's all Democrats and Republicans yelling at each other. And really my experience has been that I get a lot of things done, and most of them are bipartisan. And we're in split government here in the state of Michigan. And so the word compromise and the word negotiation, those aren't bad words. And so I would push people to look outside sort of the national news and to look at their locals as actually an example of getting things done successfully for the state.
Well, if we look at that then locally, the campaigning you did going up to that primary in August and in the time since as we head towards November, the voters that you've spoken to in the 93rd District and you as the candidate hoping to seek re-election here, what would you say are the top 3 issues in this campaign that they and you have identified?
Top 3. I would say that the number one issue is the state's response to COVID. That is by far and away the number one issue. The number 2 issue, which oddly enough plays with number 1, is how we treat schooling and how schools make a decision on whether they are open or not open or remote or a hybrid. And then funding of government programs. I think a lot of people talk about funding of infrastructure. I know that was a huge conversation in 2019 and then really tapered off once COVID hit. But those are the things I'm hearing.
If we look then first at the COVID-19 response, and with most candidates we've spoken to, it's the lens that has colored everything. So as we look at its impact on the schools, on the economy, and so forth, let's break it down because you said specifically COVID-19 response. So as you look to how we have handled it, the state's level of preparedness, and what would we do if we were to encounter something like this again? What are the proposals you would want to take back to Lansing that would help us to be in a better place than we have been through much of these last 7 months?
My first reaction would be the state right off the bat, when COVID hit hard at the start of March, did the things that it needed to do. And I don't think there's a single individual who will tell you that we could have been completely prepared, because this was a novel virus and is a novel virus. So health professionals, I'm married to a physician, so I talk to her all the time about this. Health professionals did not know how to treat this, did not know how to tell certain people you should go in for a test right away or you're fine, or what experimental medicines we can even try. And so I don't think there's one individual who would say, boy, we just, we really bungled it because we didn't know. No one knew. We were all sort of working together, the governor's office and health professionals and the legislature all working together in March. Now, what I would say is something we need to do better as a state is after March, the governor decided that her executive orders would dictate the state's response to COVID going forward. And that's not exactly how I see government working. And so I felt like there should be a back and forth with the legislature advocating for the people and the governor then, making the final decision, but with input. Instead, what we got was the governor's executive orders. Now, whether or not you agree with all the executive orders or you don't like any of them, I just wanted a better process going forward. So because the Supreme Court knocked down those executive orders, and for good this week, they knocked them down, then my number one goal and our number one goal as a House and a Senate should be to govern to work with the governor's office on the state's response going forward. And that's what we're going to do. That's what we did this week, extending unemployment benefits that had currently, or excuse me, used to be an EO, allowing remote public meetings, allowing electronic signatures to be done remotely, and approving essentially the ones that were done during the pandemic and during the governor's executive orders. So we're already doing it. We're already working, and we'll continue to work. I think our next step, and I'm sorry if I'm cutting off a question you're going to ask, our next step is to put forward a state plan to how, capacity limits and all the specifics that the governor was recently taking care of via EO but can't do anymore. So that will be our next large step in regards to the state's response to COVID.
Staying with the healthcare issue for just a moment then, and you mentioned looking not only at what has been done so far, but the capacity limits for our healthcare facilities. Anything else that comes to mind when it comes to the access to healthcare? If we've seen any impact coming through this, or is there any concern about that moving forward as we've seen the impact on the healthcare industry because of the strain that COVID-19 and the economic downturn have taken on the state as a whole?
So the state legislature put millions and millions and millions towards our infrastructure and directly to hospitals so that they could fight COVID, make sure that they had the tools to fight COVID. We also pump money into testing. There's actually a bill that I sponsored, House Bill 6293, moving through the legislature right now, and that will ensure that health professionals can continue to do testing and be trained properly for testing going forward. So that's just one aspect of it. I think one thing we learned is the number one danger during COVID at the start was that health facilities risked being overwhelmed by hospitalized patients. Because once you have that, then you have to focus on these very serious patients, and you can't take care of other individuals who have very serious medical needs. And then you're looking at the danger of hospitals being overrun and people not getting proper health care. And that's worst case scenario. That was our number one goal, which was to fight coronavirus, to stop that from happening. We did it. We did a really nice job with that. And I think the hospital's challenge going forward, and our challenge as the legislature, is to make sure that the information that is out there, we know it, hospitals know it, and so if there's ever a danger that one hospital is getting close to being filled, then we can pump in resources, pump in physicians, and really pay attention to that. So that's one aspect of it. If we talk about a second part, a lot of folks are talking about masks right now, and I think that's a really good conversation to have. And again, I'm sorry if I preempted a question, but masks have shown to be effective if individuals are in close quarters, especially in poorly ventilated indoor buildings. And so I am supportive of, and I know local health organizations are supportive of masks being part of the state's response. And so I think that's going to be a big conversation going forward.
You mentioned, too, the schools, and we saw certainly an impact at the end of, or the springtime, mid-March, when all of this took place, and then its impact as the fall semesters were starting to get underway for our schools. The impact that you have seen so far, and that the voters, educators you've been in touch with, what do they identify as the concerns when it comes to education in our present system and the blended learning and so forth as we move forward?
That's a great question. So first of all, broadband, rural broadband is something that we're working on as a House and a Senate. There's just such a need for it. Extending that, it's got to be done correctly. And so that's what House Bill 4288 does, which allows to set up sort of a continuing rural broadband plan. We've pumped a lot of money into rural broadband, and that's why most of the state is covered, but it's got to get better going forward, especially right now. You have individuals, even where I live, which is right next to Lansing, individuals in a Langsburg or Bath who probably don't have good enough rural broadband. So they have to do other methods of learning remotely. And it creates a very fragmented education system. So rural broadband is a #1 focus for the House and probably for the Senate too. I don't think anyone will claim that sitting on a computer is going to be a better learning experience than that very integrated in-person learning. But everybody's doing it. We're all sort of. I've got a child, 2.5, so I don't have to do that with her. But I know so many of my colleagues and people in the state of Michigan have kids who are in school, and it's really hard because they're doing it remotely. And so we're all just sort of learning on it as it goes. I think during the summer, the teachers had a little more time to put together plans and what those plans look like. Will people ever claim that 2020 was a bumper crop for a great, learning scenario for kids? Probably not, but we're definitely doing all we can to get the health and safety combined with an education for kids. You can't just shut off education for a year. And I know there were some folks who said, boy, maybe we should just kind of sit this year out. And, kids are always learning. Yes, it will be different via computer. It will be different not seeing the teacher's face all the time in person, maybe being able to go ask questions after class. But we did pass a return to learn plan, the House's return to learn plan. And that was a bipartisan, bicameral plan that essentially gave flexibility to the locals, because some locals and the families that go to those schools are very comfortable with in-person schooling, even amidst the threat of individuals getting coronavirus. That's a large amount of schools. Some just say, look, it's too difficult. We are going to do remote, or we're going to do a hybrid. We wanted to give them flexibility, and we were really proud to work on that. And I did vote in favor of that plan.
We've got just about a little less than a minute left. I want to give the last 30 seconds for your final message too. But you also mentioned funding the program's infrastructure. Certainly broadband comes underneath that. Attention that you would want to give to other infrastructure concerns outside of the broadband issue as we would be moving forward.
Yeah, so the House passed a plan in 2019 which said that every penny that you pay at the pump should go to roads. Right now, that's not how it works in the state of Michigan. So we did disagree with the governor's 45-cent gas tax. We felt like that wasn't going to be helpful. We felt like it would harm the working poor and many businesses. So we had our own plan, and it did not go through. The governor did not believe in that and sign it, but we are committed to funding infrastructure in the state of Michigan, and we do spend billions on it. And so we're very careful. Sometimes it's not what government does, but what it doesn't do. And I didn't think that government should drop a 45-cent gas tax on the people of the state of Michigan. So I did disagree with that. And I believe that our plan was a little bit better. And so we hope to run that back in 2021, start those conversations again.
In our last half minute with you then, sir, that final message you would want to leave to the voters as they are getting set to go to the polls.
Well, I guess if the message is for me, I'm going to work in a bipartisan manner, sitting in Lansing. I'm going to get things done. Yes, I come from the Republican side and conservative individual, very fiscally conservative, but I'm going to get things done for people while I'm in Lansing. That's what I was elected to do.
Well, we appreciate your time in talking with us, and also to the voters in the 93rd District. Stay safe and good luck with the rest of the campaign. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Representative Graham Fuller has been our guest. He is the Republican incumbent for House District 93. He is seeking a second term to that office. All qualifying party candidates for these offices were invited to participate in our series. And I'm David Nicholas on behalf of all of us. Thank you for joining us, and remember to get out, cast your vote on Tuesday, November 3rd.